I guess we can kind of get started. Well, it's 1 o'clock now, according to my um.
Okay.
So, um, I'm Jake Claflin. I'm in the English department. I think I know most of you or recognize most of the names, but just in case. Uh, um, I was one of I think two teachers last term that taught everything as IWC, so Interactive Web Conference, meaning exactly as we are doing right now. I actually use Teams, not Zoom, and I have some reasons for that. And I'll be honest that right now, excuse me, many things going on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time just telling you or talking to you. I really want to get some questions from you guys and give you a sense of at least what I learned doing this last term, because this is a lot more of I made some mistakes and learned the hard way than this is hey, everything went great and this is a great way to teach. It's not, yeah. Um, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of what happened last term, what I did right, what I think I did right, at least what I know I did wrong, and just some basics there. And then my hope is to turn it over to you guys and let you guys ask questions, and at least maybe as a group we might find some answers for those. Some I may have some answers for, and some I may not. So that way we can hopefully help each other. But as I said, I taught 4 classes all through IWC and Teams. Oh, that's where I got on that. If you guys want to know why I chose Teams, I'm willing to talk about that later, but I don't want to dig into that right now. But I had some good reasons for Teams, and I found it successful for this. I think the main thing to note, the main problem that I had was that I entered into this thinking this was going to be a digital replacement for a classroom, that it would work like it worked in the building, right? That students would, even if they weren't engaged directly, like constantly asking questions and participating in the discussion, would at least, I would be able to tell that they were paying attention. And I honestly think that's what some of my students did wrong too, is they entered into the class thinking that that was the format. And that we learned, I'm not going to say quickly, it took some time, I think, for both the students and for me to figure out that that's not the way this works. This format is, I think, I would argue it's much harder than both online, straight asynchronous online, and being in a classroom. I've only done a little bit of asynchronous teaching online, so I really can't speak to why I think it's, at least for me, it was harder. I'm not a very well-trained online teacher, so I don't want to dig into there. But for me, the main problem I ran into was the problem, actually, if you guys look, you're probably seeing now, only 5 of you have cameras on. I'm not shaming anybody that doesn't have a camera. You don't have to turn your cameras on if you want to. I don't care. But that, when you are a classroom teacher and expecting to teach in a classroom style online, when you can only see a few of your students, it's a problem, right? We all know that how easy we can see that student that's not paying attention, or the student that didn't get it, right? They have that look on their face, so we can go, oh, I need to explain that again in a way that's going to help that student. That's really hard to do when all you can see is their name. And that was the biggest issue for me, was trying to figure out a way to deal with that. So the way I ended up doing that, at least towards the end of the term, was kind of ad hoc. I kind of had to make some things up and figure it out as we went. And thankfully, a lot of the students were willing to work with me. Like I brought this to their attention, and as with all of the classes, we talked about it, and we worked on ways that we could get more people involved and get engagement, and hopefully get more of them to see that they needed to step up a little. Because I think that's one of the other things, is the students have to buy into it. If they don't buy into it, they can log in, they can put you on, their phone while they make dinner and sort of tune you out. Which, at least for my classes, doesn't work. I don't think it works for any of our classes, honestly, but I don't do lecture stuff. I do a lot of discussion in my classes. So I want that interaction. I want the students helping us figure it out, what's going on. One of the most successful things I actually did, and actually looks like you guys are already using it, which is the chat. I let students ask questions or comment in the chat. And that actually brought more students forward than I had seen. I'd had students I think I'd seen once or twice on camera. And the moment I was like, all right, let's use this chat, let's, you know, toss questions and comments and responses and emojis, whatever you want, into this chat. I got students that I hadn't heard from or seen for the first few weeks all of a sudden popping up, and responses to questions and all of that. It became much more useful for me as a way of engaging with them. Other things, and if you've looked into some of this, are using the breakout rooms, sending them into small group discussions where they work together on their own, giving them some clear guidance there. And then bringing them back was something I would do. Obviously, bring them back and then have somebody from that. Oh, I got more people. Have people from the group report to the class about what they discussed, what their answers were to the questions, and that kind of thing. Setting up questions that could have multiple answers, I think, helped, so that we could have the different groups sort of defend what they were working on. Like I came up with this answer to what this part of this essay means, and another group would have a different answer, so we could look at how they got there and compare notes about the paper and things like that. So yeah, wow. I'm going to skim through the chat. I forgot to put it up here just to see, because that's one of the things I've also found when I did the chat is I need to be reading it, but I also found that if I'm voicing it back to the students, it helped them. So Tracy's talking about hybrid being harder. I've heard that. I thankfully have not had to teach hybrid yet, but I've heard that from teachers here as well as some friends I have doing hybrid at ISU. Matt, you mentioned requiring all students have their camera on or they don't get attendance participation points. I understand, and I know a lot of students or teachers that do that. I wanted to actually address this, so thank you for bringing it up. It is a oh, Peggy, that's a great idea. I'll have to implement that. Thank you. She has the idea of have students watch chat to help me include comments. That's a great idea. I asked that cameras were required last term, but I didn't tie it to any grade. So they didn't lose points if they turned a camera off or anything like that. And in part, I did that because there was a lot of chatter on the pandemic pedagogy list. I don't know if any of you, I hope you all are part of it. It's a Facebook list that got started right after the COVID lockdown, where college and university teachers all over the country are asking questions and answering how they're dealing with all of the issues that we've had to deal with through this. But there's been a great deal of chatter in the pandemic pedagogy about that being problematic, asking them to turn on their cameras. And actually speaking with Ryan and Jenny from our online learning department, they also expressed concern about that, in that there's some potential legal issues about us asking the student to turn on a camera that gives us a window into their private home, right? And yes, at least in my case, I am in my private home. This is my home office, and the school is asking me to do it. I will state that I didn't start in this office, and as we moved into knowing I was doing that, this room opened up. We had a roommate that left, and instead of this becoming my wife's sewing room, it became my office to do this. So this is a curated office behind me, as crazy and chaotic as it is. This is, well, if any of you have been to my office at the college, it's similarly somewhat chaotic and stuff. So it's not much different than what it looks like there. But that's the reason I think this term I am going to also resist the tagging, what am I looking for? Tying points to having a camera on. I also ran into students who, I had one whose webcam broke halfway through the term and didn't have the money to get a new webcam. Like, what do I do with that student in that case where they're having a hardware issue? And while we have some webcams available, at least at that time, we had some webcams available through checkout at the library, they only got 2 weeks out of it, right? And that doesn't work if they're not going to be able to get the money to replace or buy a new webcam for their system beforehand. Yeah, there were a lot of interesting issues like that came up. But I think my comment on the cameras is I'm not going to make that a point-based system, or either reward or penalize for not having cameras on. The chat function, I think, helped, as I said. The breakout rooms helped. I did try polls. That's something that a number of people have mentioned before in this format. Teams is the one thing I wish Teams had, is a good poll system. We do have Poly, which is sort of an add-on to Teams, but it seems like to be able to effectively use it a lot, you have to pay for it. And I'm not willing to subscribe to a thing like that. Tracy, yeah, polls work well. Just looking back again at the comments, yeah, the weak internet causes problems too, and we had some internet problems as well. That might be something to mention. One of the things I ended up doing because I think it was a week or two into class, we had that big storm that came through, and I'm hoping you guys all remember that fun thing. It ripped a branch off of a tree and took out both my power and the internet. Like it pulled the cables off of my house. That was a Sunday night. So Monday I had to, using my phone in the dark, email classes and say, hey, we're not going to be able to meet because I have no way of getting online. I would suggest if you're going to be teaching fully online like that, the hybrid, or not the hybrid, probably for hybrid too, depending, have a policy for what happens if you lose power during class or if you disconnect. That's one of the things that I implemented right after that, was a way to tell them what happens if I disappear. What should you do? Because I'm at home and I have a pretty robust computer here with a battery backup, what they're told, for me at least, is just wait, I'll be back. Because even if I lose power and internet, my phone is usually charged and I can hotspot on the phone. This computer has Wi-Fi, so I can use that to get online long enough at least to bring the class to a close or something. Or maybe just to hold out the 5 minutes it takes for them to figure out how to turn things back. I'm also thinking about implementing the exit tickets that Dr. Wagner was talking about, or something like that. A sort of end of session litmus test, as it were, to like who was paying attention, who learned something, who has questions based on what we were talking about, to help me then structure the next section as well. The other thing that I've been thinking about is I guess what you might call a participation point rubric, a sort of list of things that the students can do during class that would earn them participation points. They wouldn't lose anything, but it would be, like if you have your camera on during the class, I'm debating that one. It would just, you would earn a point just for having the camera on. It doesn't matter what you did within reason beyond that. You would earn points for speaking, turning your mic on and answering a question, for communicating in the chat, that kind of thing. So they would be building a kind of participation. I'm not sure. I'm still actually kind of spitballing what I'm going to do with that. I'm just looking to see what else we have here. Online survey, currently cannot use Microsoft Survey. Yeah, the survey would be nice. Or the other thing that they could, and I've talked to IT about it, is it's Microsoft, I've forgotten the name, but there's another add-on that we can get that would allow us to build surveys or polls or something without it. It isn't the Microsoft survey. It's something else that allows you to build little program sort of macro things into Teams and other Microsoft stuff. If I can remember what it is, I will remember it. I asked IT and they told me that admin was considering it. I haven't heard anything since then on that for Microsoft. And again, the polls is an issue on Microsoft. Polling is not a problem on Zoom. Tracy, you like the idea, but you're really ready for that much tracking? No, which is why I haven't decided 100% what I'm doing yet. I'll have it figured out by Friday. That's the main reason why I've been kind of like, I don't want to constantly have to do, because I mean, to do that, I'd have to have something paper here. There's no way I could do it digitally on the computer fast enough that the students aren't going to be noticing me going, all right, great. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, there's just a lot of questions that I still have about this. This is an iterative process of learning to teach these classes. I did want to mention at least one other thing before. I want to make you sure we're using most of this for Q&A, for you guys to ask some questions and us as a group to, again, think and at least offer some ideas. I wanted to talk a little bit about my technical setup. I used to have a picture that showed me from behind. And I want to make it clear that the bulk of my equipment is stuff that I had for other reasons outside of school. But I'm on a full desktop. I have 3 screens. You guys are the center. I have 2 side screens, a webcam. I have actual lights because I'm pretty dark if I don't light myself. I have a nice mic. It's right off here. You can't see. And again, most of this, the lights I actually purchased for this, but they're $15 little, oh here, they're little clamp-on just LED things that I found for I think $12 a pop on Amazon. They plug into USB, and I have a bus over here that has switches, so I can just turn them on and off. But the one thing I did invest a little bit in for this was one of these sort of tablets. I forget what brand. This is an X Pen. It's kind of a generic Wacom tablet, if you know what those are, or Bamboo is another one. They allow you to use the whiteboard. I'm trying to find it here. There is a whiteboard function in Zoom, but I may not have it.
You just have to click the share screen.
Okay, thank you. Now I got to find that one. There it is. Yep, there it is, whiteboard. So I can pop in and then be able to at least try to write something.
Right.
Teams has it as well. Has a whiteboard setting that allows me to get in. Hang on, I've got more people in the waiting room. People just keep to be. Really wish we could figure out a way that they could just pop in. So I'm gonna. I'll go ahead and stop that because I just wanted to show a little bit. Nope, that button. The tablet I have cost about $100. We got kind of lucky here as a windfall. My wife was invited to teach an online class in the same sort of IWC format for Portland State University, and her father decided she needed some money for a setup because she did not have a setup like this. And he sent her a sizable check that we were able to use to get her equipped with a camera and a mic and some lighting, and we used a little bit to purchase a couple of these so that she had one and I had one. You can get smaller versions of this. You can get them as cheap as I think about $50. They're not big. They're kind of about that, but they did help for when I wanted to put stuff up on a whiteboard like thing, because I'm usually in classrooms whiteboard dependent. I'm constantly writing things on the whiteboard and making connections and drawing lines and all of that, and so it helped a bit. It's not as intuitive as a whiteboard is, because a whiteboard you just have a pen and you go, but it has helped. And I think if you're going to be teaching the full online IWC, I think thinking about your setup is probably a good move. That way you know sort of where things are going to be, where you can put stuff. The multiple screens lets me have the PowerPoint up I'm looking at, keep up a screen where I can see my students, and the chat. The chat I usually actually have on a separate screen, makes it a little easier for me to follow. Again, I use Teams and not Zoom, so it's a little harder for me to follow some of that. I really think that that's about what I have. I really do want to open it up to questions to see what are you guys worried about if you're teaching these, particularly for the first time, or what experiences you guys have had, or other suggestions. Tracy's asking me to give pros and cons of my experience. That's probably a good idea. I mean, the main pro was that I was able to stay home and not leave during COVID. I have a couple of pre-existing conditions that would exacerbate COVID. My conditions aren't really that much of an issue, but if I caught COVID, it would make it worse. And my wife is immunocompromised, and my mother-in-law, who also lives with us, is of the higher age range. So there were a lot of reasons that I wanted to not be commuting and in places where I could come in contact with that. So that was the key pro and the main reason I did it. I think another pro was that I was still able to find a way to have the kind of discussions that I tend to prefer in class. Very early in class, early in the term, students were more engaged. They were more interested in what we were doing and willing to put in some of the work. And so a lot of the first few weeks classes were good. We had a lot of stimulating conversation. We learned a lot of things as a group and dug into some of the essays we were looking at and such. I think the other pro was, for me, I think it is a pro that we had so many cons, right? I've talked a bit about the cons. The main con is losing. I had a lot of students sort of lose interest. And another one of the cons is trying to teach a class where you were looking at only a few faces or no faces. I had several classes where no one had a camera on. I'm just looking at a screen full of names, my camera light, and no idea whether or not anyone is paying any attention to me speaking into the void. That was the biggest con for me. Those were the hardest moments when somebody would turn their camera off. The last student in the class who had their camera on would turn it off because for some reason, and you know, the last 10 minutes of class, I'm speaking into the void. Uh, um, Interesting, Zach. You said they're more willing to participate in Zoom than in the classroom, and that could be discipline. There might be. I teach, as I said, English, and I think a lot of students don't want to be in my class because, of course, I do a lot of the 101, 102 classes that everybody's got to take. Some were more willing. Honestly, I will say some were more willing to participate, particularly in the group thing. When I went into breakout rooms, far more of them seem to be willing to work in groups than I've seen on face to face. They don't seem to be as willing. There's always a couple of kids that kind of join a larger group and sort of sit up by the side paying no attention. Where when they were all in a digital breakout room, they seem to involve themselves more. I'm trying to remember. I think the other con is something that the other con is that this computer is my entire social life right now. And that was from time to time a bit of a problem because I would get to the end of a long day of 3 classes and be like, I don't want to be sitting in front of a camera. I don't want to be near a computer. And because this was also where I engage with my friends, we play video games, or I'm the D&D guy, so yeah, right, all through this setup. So one of the cons about the entire format for me was that everything happened in this room, sort of a thing, for me to socialize with anybody but my wife and mother-in-law. It made some days very difficult if I had things planned later with friends. Like it would be like, okay, class is over. I have an hour before this other thing. I have to leave this room. I cannot be in here for that hour. I have to go do something else, be away, leave my phone here, That's become easier. That was an early thing as I started this. It's become a lot easier. It helps that I have other distractions in this room. My brand new 3D printer back there working on an octopus. But that was, I think, for me personally, a big con. And I know that's not as much of a teaching thing, but I like to have a separation between work and personal life. And that became harder without the commute, right? And the catharsis that the commute brought. Jake Haberly, my division head, and I talked about this early in the lockdown, that the commute, I have an hour commute back and forth to Idaho Falls. He has, I think, a half an hour. That commute for both of us was something where we could decompress and push work aside to then go home and be home. And when that was gone, it was a big issue. As I said, at this point, I've worked through that issue because I haven't had much of a choice. But yeah, that was something I didn't expect. So I really do want to turn it over here, as we're about half an hour in, to questions or comments, things that you guys have tried in both hybrid, in the hybrid classes that have worked, or questions you have about other things, whatever, really whatever. I'm open to discussion. Please voice your opinion or put it in the chat. Either one works for me.
So Jacob, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, so the course that you taught, was it fully online, and was it all like synchronous video classroom kind of stuff, or did you do like pre-recorded lectures or anything like that? Like, tell me your method of delivery for your course.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It was fully online. I taught 4 full courses last term, 3 101s and a 102 English. I didn't do any pre-recorded stuff. Everything was live, synchronous. We met, the average 2 times a week for each class. Yeah, that was the method of delivery. They got it through that. They turned things in on Blackboard, and then again, we use Teams, not Zoom. One of the main reasons I use Teams, this is a good moment to mention that, Teams is integrated with Microsoft Word. So they could do things like upload papers for peer review, and also be able to meet in a group while having access to those papers in the same program, right? So they didn't have to worry about multiple programs. So that was pretty much it. They had Blackboard for the bulk of their content, like that's where they would go to find assignments and reading that wasn't in a textbook, and where to turn things in. They had Zoom for meetings. They could text me in Zoom, private channel. I mean, they could do it whenever they wanted. They just knew that I wouldn't respond at certain times of the day. And we had small groups and other sort of functions through Teams as well. But it was all live. I didn't do any pre-recorded. I think the only pre-recorded I have is an instructor bio video on Blackboard. Because I found it, and I'm glad I thought about it. I found it useful to email the students before term began and open up my Blackboard before term began on the Friday before. So they had the weekend to kind of peruse, to get a sense of what we were doing, to look at the software that I'm requiring, which is just Teams and Word, basically. But yeah, it was completely live. Good. I'm just looking to see Tracy pre-recorded audio uploaded to Blackboard, not to give away all the details.
Jacob, I keep those audios really short.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I have a really good app on the phone, so you can do it on the fly, and it's free. And I think the whole thing of it is that it gives key information, and they really like that, and then it helped them to come to workshops ready to work.
Mm-hmm.
But you lose the quality or you lose the edge if you go beyond probably a little over 4 minutes, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
3 and 4 minutes is the sweet spot.
I did, when we first had lockdown in March last year, I did pre-recorded lectures for what was left of the classes at that point. Mine were a little longer because it's me and my students liked to pry a little. I usually did a little sort of like, hey, here's a glimpse of my private life, to try to give them a bit of a sense of, I don't know, comfort or something, that even though the world was going crazy, I was still here doing normal things, I guess. But I found that the videos where the lecture portion was longer than about 10 minutes, yeah, they were, the second they would not have any of the information passed about the 10-minute mark on the lecture. So
here's an additional thought that was really popular, and you can let the genie out of the bottle, so be careful. I used really mini audios for like assignments and things.
Mm-hmm.
And students really like that, because I would say, hey, when you get started, you want to consider X, Y, and Z. Did you think about this, that, and the other? They loved those. And they only take me, maybe 15, 20 minutes tops from the time I record to upload. So it's not an inordinate amount of time, probably even, faster. But again, if I noticed an area or a muddy point, I worked that in. And that was kind of helpful.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
Tracy, sorry, go ahead, Jacob.
I was going to say, I mean, I did similar stuff between classes, right? The synchronous portion helped because I could note what was problematic and bring it up in classes. But yeah, doing little audio things, I hadn't thought about that I emailed them all the time.
Right.
Or use team texting, but audio might be something that they might engage with more than my random emails.
So Tracy, when you're talking about these audios, are you talking about like a little audio video clip, or are you talking just a recorded audio only message?
I'm staying away from the video right now because I think we're going to end up having to have a discussion with administration about audio and video, because where does that live, the link. But in answer to your question, I'm using a free app on my smartphone. I'm using Android, and it's audio only. And mine, I have two, but the one that I seem to just default is called Voice Recorder.
So with that,
pardon me?
So with that app and that methodology of delivering the information, does it automatically transcribe everything into like closed captioning for you? I'm just wondering about like our ADA requirement.
Well, here's the deal. If you want, no. Unless you want to pay for it. And if you're going to pay for it, step up and pay for Otter. It's the most accurate. The courts are using it. However, it's not free, or at least that version is. So anything that you're going to get transcription and good transcription at that, it's going to be paid. I've already gone down that road, so you don't need to go there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But Otter, I would recommend Otter if you guys get money to use it, because it's has a very high accuracy rate.
Liz Onifer, I think, uses it for the videos she does for her classes and has been using it for, I think, before she even got started here, and she likes it a lot. Yeah, she does a lot of video. We've had some questions, just kind of some basics on technology. Kathleen was asking about requiring them to print something. Danielle has a question about audio for those who are visual learners. That's probably a different question, but the technology issue is a big problem with this kind of class format. It is literally a requirement, at least on mine, that they have a computer with a webcam and working mic. I had students try this on the phone. They tried to do this class on the phone, and I'm sure some of them found it successful to log in and listen on the phone. But when they need to engage, the phone isn't going to work. Particularly if I say, all right, open up Word because we're going to do a writing exercise. Because I used Word through Teams often to have them just open up and start a file, because it auto saves it right where I tell them to open up their file. So then I have direct access and we could talk about it. It is an issue, though, when we're in a rural community college where we have students that don't have access to technology. I did find that the Center for New Directions is there to help a little. I had a student who checked out a laptop from them for class. That is, again, why I think it's a good idea to contact them before term starts, because that student reached out to me, I don't think an hour after I sent out an email going, you were going to need these things for class, going, I don't have it, what do I do? And so we were able to talk to the Center for New Directions and get her set up with a laptop before term started. But it is an interesting, it's a double-edged sword too, because you have students who have all the technology they need and use it in creative ways. I had to kick 2 people out of classes last term for driving while attending class.
Yeah.
One of them I found out, like, going, hey, what's going on? Normally you're active. She's like, well, I'm driving to a funeral right now. And I'm like, why are you in class? No, concentrate on driving. Talk to me when the funeral's over and we'll deal with it. Like, that's one of those situations that, yeah, go do the thing you need to do. We'll deal with class later. The other one was just moving houses and he had his camera on. So I flip over to look into this breakout room and there he is. And I'm like, no, off. No, you can't do that. I don't care that Blackfoot doesn't have a law about your phone, but no. Yeah. And some of them use it in some creative, as I said. I had a student that would, I think I was on the phone, would put me on phone, turn her camera on, and then I would watch as she was preparing dinner, sort of looking over, every so often. I had one, thankfully he didn't use the bathroom, but I had him go into the bathroom to like brush his teeth during a night class. Brought the computer with it, set him on the, watching him brush his teeth while he's like, yeah. In some cases, I think that highlights one of the things that students are going to see this more like the other digital content they consume, like their YouTube or their TikTok or whatever the heck is popular now. Don't keep up, and I'm not going to. They tend to access the class, I think, the way they would a podcast or a YouTube video that they put on in the background while they're doing something. Right, and that's part of the problem, because that's not engagement directly the way that we want, right? And yes, some of that has to do with how the class itself is structured. Many of the students I had doing that were relying on the students that ask questions to basically sort of get the class to move forward, because I run a discussion-based sort of model in my class. But if I didn't have nobody asking questions, yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating, and I don't have all the answers yet. Talk to me in about 16 weeks. I may have some more for you. Other questions or comments, things that you worry about or something. Have you seen any benefit to trying to keep classes a bit shorter? Zach asks. Yeah, shorter sessions. I found definitely towards the end of term, I was ending sessions 5-10 minutes early easily, because we just kind of run out and students were kind of exhausted by it, I guess, or something. So we'd be like, all right, I'm done, go back to doing whatever. I mean, I've done that in face-to-face as well when we're sort of exhausted the topics. Because some of the stuff we looked at, they're relatively easy essays with a sort of central focus that I want to work on, and if they get it quickly. But I think being flexible in ending class early, if you run to the end of it, is probably a good idea. More in this format, give them more time to do other things, I guess. So yeah, that's a good question. Have there been other questions that I've missed on the chat? Because it's been pretty bouncing over there, and I haven't been able to keep up on all of it. I don't think so. Other questions or comments?
So when you were teaching, when you went to teaching in a classroom setting to teaching fully online, how did your approach to teaching or your approach to delivering the material change as the semester went on?
That's a good question. So the problem I mentioned early on was that it didn't at first, right? When I first sat down at the beginning of fall in this format, I really hadn't changed it much other than really thinking through the technology the students would need to access class. I've done a lot of that, figuring out teams. I built all the tutorials that I think Angela has shared with you, I hope all of you, for students to access teams and all of that. But I hadn't thought about the day-to-day things in class. The key thing for me that has been the change, and this is getting into that participation or engagement sort of grade idea, is far more little things that require them to respond, to somehow show me they're paying attention, as it were, or engagement. That's more what I would prefer. Like if they're paying attention, that's one thing, but I would prefer that they're actually, absorbing the information and moving us forward instead of just I did a lot more group work than I normally do in class, small group talking to give them a chance to engage in that smaller function. I did a lot of things. Once I opened up the chat, I found that letting them use the chat to handle a lot of bigger questions too, right? I had one day where I had a question from the reading that I started the meeting, popped it into chat, and said, this is what you're going to do. I'm going to give you the first 15 minutes of class to continue writing this. Put your answer in chat, right? And so the first 15 minutes of class is me just sitting here watching them type. Not something I would ever do in a classroom. But it was successful. They all had interesting ideas. They all responded to the prompt. We were able to look through in the chat and systematically sort of break down what people were saying and look at where people had misinterpreted and say, okay, maybe you're missing this piece of information or that. Like those little sort of engagement things turned out to be the most successful moments. I think the main problem I had is that they would give me a good 15, 20 minutes and then I'd only have one of them planned. So I think that's one of the takeaways is have a lot more of them in your back pocket, as it were. One of the things for me in teaching is that I tend to be a very ad lib teacher. I tend to I don't write a lot of lesson plans and have my whole day planned out. I have topics I want to cover, big points I want to make sure we hit, and I kind of let the students guide that. That is a bit more problematic in the online style, the IWC. I found I needed more structure and needed more, all right, we've come to the end of this and not enough of you were helping me move forward. So here's the next pushing, the next thing to push us forward. I hadn't had to do that in most of my face-to-face classes before then. So as I said, I'm still, this is still an evolving thing for me. I'm definitely not set in my ways on how to do this. I mean, we talked earlier, not 100% certain what this engagement participation sort of score, which I normally don't do in class, is going to look like. I think I need one now, but I don't know what it's going to look like yet. I'll take ideas that you guys are submitting as well for it to help me build it. But they need something more engaging, I think, is what my big takeaway. And something relatively easy, not complex. When I did use polls, I was able to get Polly to work for one class, the responses were, first of all, overwhelming. More students responded to the poll I put up than had responded to questions in weeks at that point. And I got a good sense of where they were sitting because we were just doing a lecture on citation styles. And so it was like, all right, I'd ask a question based on what we just covered, like how to format a title. So I'd ask, how do you format the title of a novel? Right. And they have two answers, italics or underline or quotes. And that's, just something like that. They would, okay, look, here's the basic answer. We just covered it. Okay, great. Easy. They should know it, right? If they paid attention, because we haven't talked about, the complex stuff where you have quotes and italics and all that. So, but it seemed to keep them on. Kathleen, yes, Polly is the poll system on Teams, but you are limited in the number of people that can respond if you don't pay for it.
Right.
That's what I ran into. I could only use it for one class that day, and we couldn't even get through. I think I had a total of 4 polls. We couldn't get through more than 2 polls before it shut us down because it only let us have something like 30 responses to a poll. Yeah, it was interesting. And again, I'm not willing to front that kind of money to try to get that. I actually didn't even look into it just because I had other things I was trying to get sorted out. And again, I'm still trying to see if I can find a way around it. I need to talk to IT, and I cannot remember the name of that damn Microsoft program. But there is one that would allow you to build polls or even sign up sheets and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but it requires an add-on.
It's not the one I'm thinking of is a Microsoft product itself. It does require it to be add-on to Teams, but they were talking about adding that on. And that's what I need to talk to IT, whether or not administration decided that they would basically foot the bill is the problem, because I think it costs us money to do.
Yep.
So Tom Marcotte, I'm probably slaughtering his last name. Anyway, he's in this group, and he had mentioned earlier in the thread that all that's needed is a admin approval to add that on.
Great. And when I talked to IT, sounded like that admin was thinking about it. I voiced my desire for it through my department chair to Angela, and I did get a response from Angela. She's great, thank you. I haven't heard anything since. I haven't looked though.
You should have Faculty Senate take this up.
That might be an idea if we don't have it. There are a couple of things I would like in Teams that I asked IT for. The Teams is supposed to have a way that you can check to see who attended a meeting. And everything I can run into, it's literally like the IT admin has to go and click a button. That's what the internet led me to believe. Forms, yes, Tom, that's the one. Forms.
Forms is blocked. I've already looked into it.
Yeah, that's the one I asked for though, because it would let us create that kind of we could create polls or surveys or any of that. That's
Plus
what
it downloads it into Excel. And students, one of the reasons that the surveying is really important to me is, first of all, it's getting them to do something and they like it, but also I've signed for participation points and other things, a portion of lecture or a chapter, and a student goes away and they create it. And then they host it. Now, of course, I co-host, but it's impossible to do with everything locked down, because you have pieces, and that's the problem, is all you have is pieces, and now you don't have anything to bring this, the spokes to the hub, so to speak.
Yeah, and I ran into that a number of times with things on Teams that again, we're supposed to be able to have this piece that lets us check and see who attended a meeting, but they tell me that they don't have it. Yeah, we do have, Teams has one downside to Teams that I found is that it doesn't give you everybody in a screen like Zoom does.
Right.
But there is a way to do that, and we do have that functionality. There's a setting you have to click in Teams that enables it, and then you can't get it to do that until you have over 10 people with cameras on, is the downside. Once you have over 10 people with cameras, you can enable this large mode, and it'll do a 7x7 grid for you if you have that many students, obviously. Yeah. We also now have breakout rooms. I just checked and found out that functionality is now in Teams. It wasn't before, where you could just click a button and send students to breakout rooms. I had to build them as separate channels and assign them to rooms. So that functionality will be there this term, thank God. But the polling is sort of the last thing that I really wish we could get figured out, because I think that would be very beneficial, particularly for for me, for those moments when I am just lecturing about, you need to know this information, right? For me, it's mostly MLA, because a lot of the
Well,
rest.
yeah, how do you get feedback if everybody's got their, their camera off? To be honest, and really, this does need to go through faculty senate, because at the end of the day, I would say that the vast majority of us have engaged our students to the extent we can.
Mhm.
Now we need the additional tools that the technology has that will be useful, and that decision has to be made at a higher place. I think we've saturated what we can do.
Yeah, but we also need to be asking for those tools.
I've been asking.
Yeah. Well,
We
hopefully,
need
if more
more
of us keep
people
asking.
to ask.
As I said, if more of us keep asking, maybe they'll figure it out. So, first priority. But Kathleen says money into captioning for ADA. Yeah. I don't know. I know. I think that there was another school I worked at. If this keeps up, one of the things that we may want to actually ask the ADA department to do is hire a captioner. Idaho State had them. If you created video content for any class, you could turn it over to their disability services and they would caption for you. They were usually student work studies. But that might be something down the road that we need to see if we can get as a captioner. Yeah. Other questions, comments outside of the technology? So, yeah, go ahead.
Hiring somebody to caption everything is incredibly inefficient when you've got programs like Dragon Speaking or Otter, or these AI programs that are accustomed to voice recognition and like spelling everything out. I think this is a great thing for Faculty Senate to bring up, and I'm glad Matthew's in on this conversation. President Birch.
Oh.
Go get a Matt.
I do have one quick question that
Yeah.
I've just been curious about. This is shifting topics just a little bit, but so this semester I have a once a week IWC course it's one of those almost 3-hour long courses that I'm a little nervous about as far as keeping everybody engaged for that long of a period of time. So I'm wondering if there's just any tips on how anybody has managed that kind of a situation to keep, break things up or keep things, I don't know. I'm just worried about that. And it's a night class as well.
Oh man. Oh yeah. I've taught a number of those 1 day a week night classes face to face. Just keeping students for 3 hours then from like 6 to 9 is, I've honestly, one of the ways that we tackled it was ending early. I think we only usually did 2 to 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, because you cannot keep them, especially that late.
Right.
I wouldn't broadcast that.
Yeah,
Zach?
well, too late.
Well, and Zach, also that's my classes that way. My classes are all 4 to 5 hour long classes in the evening, and it's
Wow.
So what I've found to be successful with my classes is just like you said, just break it up, right? So you talk for 10 to 15 minutes, do some kind of activity. Talk for 10 to 15, do some kind of activity. I break it like halfway. I just say, we're going to take a 15-minute break, go get something to drink, use the bathroom, whatever, come back and just kind of regroup a little bit. But yeah, breaking it up, I think, is really, really critical with those really long, heavy once a week types of classes.
Heather, I would add to that because I'm currently doing INL training over at the Yellowstone building. And so I've got them for 3 and 4 hours. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Of course, I get the benefit of them being professionals, so we can launch into workshops. But I treat the entire day as modules. And so I'm timing the lecture, just timing everything to be into that unit. We have breaks, we do breakout rooms, surveys, and all kinds of stuff. And we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good with it. And I think that's about as good as you can do. But breaking it up at logical places is helpful.
Yeah.
I make my students get off their ass during breaks. Otherwise, it's not a break.
Who's this guy talking?
I don't know.
Similarly, so last term I had a couple of my classes had the plus co-rec. So 1 day a week we had our normal hour, basically 2 hour, hour and a half class, followed by another hour of usually workshop stuff. And we always took a break where I ended the meeting. One of the things to state is that those 2 sessions are technically separate classes. So I didn't have to worry as much about students carrying over. But most of them would, particularly, they would come back, right? That's the worry about if I take a break and end this meeting, how many of you were coming back?
Do you use peer review?
I do, yes.
All right, because I'm working in peer review with my CEI students, and that breaks it up. Plus,
Oh, you're talking about, I'm sorry, you're talking about a software called peer review?
Pardon me?
Are you talking about software or just the process?
Just the process.
Yeah, we use that for papers, yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, take breaks. That's Zach, that's the main thing is, and build them in. And I do like the idea of the modular. Usually when I taught the 1 day a week versions, I was taking my 2 day a week classes and breaking it in half is basically what happened. We would do whatever I would do for the first day for a 2 day a week class in the first chunk, and then the second chunk, the second half.
I don't know if Heather's run into this, but I have found that you want to be careful how long your breaks are. Because if they're too long, which I'm not talking like 20 minutes necessarily, but if they're too long, you get a lot of tardiness.
Bye. Yeah,
So
make
there's
sure
a
to
little
check
bit
out.
of an art or science to
Yeah.
that one.
Yep.
I would say with the online, if you're doing full IWC, you could probably shorten it down to 10 minutes because they don't have to go anywhere to get a drink or a snack or
Right.
the bathroom, right? They don't have to go around to the other side of the building. So a 10-minute break, and that's what we have built in between the plus session and the class was 10 minutes. So I would say, all right, we'll be back here at 10. I needed it too because I needed to get up and stretch.
Right.
So
you can feel your legs again, right?
yeah. No, I'm pretty sure by the end of the day, I'm gonna be hobbling out to the kitchen just to get the walk around.
You know, and Zach, another thing that I think is helpful as well is using different types of activities, right? So if you're always doing like 10 to 15 minutes of discussion, breakout room, right? Like if that's always your thing, you're gonna lose them. Like they're gonna get super bored. So just coming up with different types of activities. I loved your idea, Jacob, of having them do the written response. You know, you've got 15 minutes to write. That's awesome. I'm like, okay, I need to write that down because that's a great idea. So yeah, just kind of changing it up that way.
We did several versions of that, and even groups where I would get the group together. Like, okay, the group as a group, you need to craft a couple responses to these questions or something. I think I hadn't thought about it, Heather, but I think you're absolutely right of varying, changing things, don't get into a pattern, which is hard because humans like patterns, and I'm very much into patterns for my day. It makes my life a lot easier. But breaking things up and something that's engaging. No matter what you're teaching, I think that you've got to have something engaging them, that they have to respond and actively do. I might have liked lectures back when I was in college, but I don't think it works in this format. Good. We've got, am I supposed to end at 1:50 so we have time? I think so.
How about you let us go early so we can have a break?
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. I think we need to actually end so so you guys have time to get the other one. Thanks for coming.
Get off your ass where it's not a break.
I'll get up and walk. If you have other questions or concerns or suggestions, please email me. I'd love to hear what works and what doesn't as we move forward. And I'll put out, if you guys want to know what's working for me, let me know. Ask a question. So.
Hey, could you put out some product detail on that piece of, what do you call it, that tablet?
It's an XP pen. Yeah, I just found it on Amazon, but I can. Oh no, I found something. I'll do some looking and I can email it to Angela maybe, and she can send it out. Or do you want me just to send it to you?
I don't mind.
Send it
Now
out
I'm
to
not.
everyone.
Remember that I'm in CTE, so Angela may not know to send it out to CTE. But
Good point.
how about send it to her and what's his new name? Chuck.
Oh, the CTE dean.
Yeah. But
okay.
I like, and you seem to like it, right?
It works. I didn't use it as much as I would use a whiteboard, but it does
okay.
work.
right.
Yeah, I use a whiteboard almost daily when I'm in a normal face-to-face class.
Okay.
But I found for certain things like we did ethos, pathos, logos, right? The classic Greek rhetorical, putting that up on the board, and we did whiteboard with that one, or anything where I might want to draw, because sometimes I'll use graphs and drawings and mapping out what an essay looks like, the basics.
Okay.
Moving to that still helped, but I didn't use it as much as I would a normal whiteboard, just because it's a little more cumbersome to pull out and use.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right.
thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Mhm.
Thanks,
So,
Jacob.
take care, guys.
Bye.